questions, I thought I could do a little bit of a lesson that I learned from when Andy did his project and released his draft report earlier this year. And it was terrific to media attention to him. He was like a rock star for a few weeks. And I remember seeing a front page, I think it was one of the papers in Queensland, saying marble bar is doomed. And I think it's when you start to bring it home to people about what their vulnerabilities are that you can actually get the media, although it always helps to sell papers if you can say something like that. But one of the lessons we have to learn is how to get this really getting more media attention and getting more things happening so that the conversation that we talked about throughout the day can actually happen in the community and they don't ignore us. But having had my little 5 cents worth.
It's a tweet question.
A tweet question?
Yes.
All right, first tweet question of the day.
What is the best way to communicate the climate message without becoming an audience?
I think in the 21st century the answer is multiple channels. I think the answer always has to be you have to use every channel available to you and keep that message out. I personally don't use Twitter. I think it's noise. But I acknowledge that in the 21st century you have to be using Facebook, you have to be using Twitter, you have to be using the website, you have to be using conventional media, conventional electronic media, you have to be using print media. You need to have that full range of outlets available to you in order to get your message out and in recognition of the fact that we're all interconnected today anyway.
I think it needs to be targeted information. It needs to target the needs of certain groups rather than to let a message out there and whoever gets it gets it. No. If the person doesn't relate to that message, they're not going to accept it. So it needs to be targeted.
I guess for these two people, I think probably we need to know the special need of each group. Say for the young generations, we call X generation or Y generations, probably use internet, Twitter, Facebook is a good way. But for the old generation, probably printed media is very important. For people in the rural communities, probably radio is an effective way to do this. So I guess for a different population, we probably need to use a different way to do it.
Thanks. Any questions from the audience? Unless you want to send a tweet in the meantime.
A question for Mr. B, just in regards to your research around heat and for communities. In terms of vector-borne disease and about the public health issues there, to what degree do your research take that into account? It's becoming a greater issue now as we look at the movement of mosquitoes, different elements there, and also in terms of extreme heat and the effect that it has on food, for example, food going quickly and dealing with waste that's occurring and that affecting the community. So it's a social issue around health.
Well, we are not able to identify our threshold temperature for vector-borne disease and foodborne disease at this moment. But what we said is there is an association, a very clear association between the temperature, rainfall, and vector-borne disease like Rissik virus infections. In far north Queensland, probably malaria, probably dengue fever as well. And foodborne disease in South Australia, especially in Adelaide, we did identify a very close association between salmonella infections and temperature. So I guess we are working together with the health department, try to send a very clear early warning message first, say if, according to the prediction from the Bureau, there will be an increase in rainfall or high temperature. We work together with the health department, emergency and SES, send a clear message. And also, I would say, as you mentioned, there's a clear association between extreme heat and those people who work outside. So we think that is a very important issue. And because our study shows there's a very clear association between the work-related injuries claims from safe work essay and the temperatures, extreme temperatures. So obviously that is the issue we need to address in future. Once again, we need to work together with government and relevant industries.
Any other questions?
had much time to elaborate on some of the more detailed findings of your work. But having identified the most vulnerable towns in Australia, I think the rural and also the top one. But you sort of ended on the note of saying, well, people don't accept that there's even an issue, you can't really move forward. But are there other adaptation factors which you think are important?
I think one of the real challenges is that acceptance of the likelihood, let's even accept the word likelihood of climate change, really enables communities to go forward and plan for what a climate change future should look like. So when I had interviews with people in Mara, in Queensland, I couldn't talk about climate change, I could only talk about climate variability. They wouldn't talk to me if I talked about climate change, but they were happy to discuss climate variability. And they have a lot of that there, as they pointed out. So I think the key point I'd make is that accepting that if you can move people to a point where they accept that there is something happening and that they need to plan for it, it's going to be very important. But even if they only are willing to accept climate variability or even something further down the tree, like there is a need for change anyway, there are actually a number of strategies that governments can put in place, in particular, to encourage those communities to begin to change. And those strategies include things such as changing planning regulations. Those things include strategies such as building facilities to a different standard and also building facility or providing new funding sources for infrastructure, etc. One of the considerable risks that face many of these settlements is that the infrastructure simply will not stand it into the future in terms of their capacity to get goods out, get goods in, have people move through. So even if people are willing to accept what is likely, you can actually use government processes to head them in that direction, even if you don't talk about climate change, saying, let's be better bushfire prepared. Let's make ourselves future-proof against drought. Let's see what we can do to adapt our cropping systems. All of those things will help you get down to that point of climate change adaptation.
Excellent. Any questions? We've got a bit of time. Oh, the front's ready before me in this session.
Mark Sevoyan, I've had a question follows on a little bit, Andrew, from what you speak about then. I know I'm speaking with behaviour change specialists, they often like to remind me that talking about risk and vulnerability is great for raising awareness, but ultimately when people take change and make change, it can be in response to positive messages. I'm just interested across the panel, what are the sort of positive messages that came out of your work that you think might actually promote change?
Yeah, in the work that we did, we found just the positivity of people and belief in themselves was really an identity. So I think identity of the group is probably really important, whether it's Indigenous or non-Indigenous. But in terms of the messages that I found in terms of working with Arabana is that they were not, that they have a very holistic perspective in terms of the integration of culture and people and environment. And I think that was quite a strength because they in fact were a lot less scared of the dread risk prognoses. Because normally you say don't talk to people about the dread risk, it'll scare people off and turn them off. We found the reverse in this project. So in terms of looking at that and saying a holistic framework and how we're viewing stuff is that connection of people, environment, cultural identity. That was quite a source of inspiration to people, that even though they lived in all sorts of different places, they saw a mental mind map where they could work together. So I think that can be transferable to different groups that might have something binding them together.
Rissik, anything that you improve?
The only thing that would come to mind at this moment is a lot of the people that were making behavioral and household changes were not necessarily really making behavioral change. They were driven by their economic need to do that and by environmental awareness, especially in very area where they have seen drought, very water resource concerned. You know, they know how to make their use more economical, but they don't necessarily believe it's because of climate change or they need to do something about climate change. So maybe just working on this on, rather than trying to make this message that climate change is happening. Because a lot of the time they just associate it with political issues rather than actual environmental issues. So they're shifting from climate change from a political sense into environmental awareness. Might be a positive message.
Yeah, I think there are two positive messages that came out of my research. One I think I already knew, one was a surprise to me. One that was a surprise to me is that when you read the technical literature, in fact, Australian agriculture in the foreseeable future, certainly in my lifetime, will not necessarily be adversely affected by climate change. Many of the cropping systems will adapt or have already adapted, and some forms of production such as grains and wool will increase in the climate change scenario. So that's a really good news story. It gives people an opportunity to focus on the opportunities of risk. The other thing that I think I already knew was that many of these communities learn best by modelling their behaviour on other examples that they've already seen and recognise as important. So if you can see a few good examples of climate change adaptation, other places will follow them.